You bet.
Thank
Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Bob, for the presentation on our company. And I think what you're going to see from us now is diving in a little bit deeper into one particular category. Just we picked cross-site scheduling because we really have been talking to our customers in in a very deep way regarding scheduling across different locations, scheduling within different departments outside of their own location, store, department, healthcare provider. So we really wanted to dig in a little bit deeper. And so Stacy, welcome as well. I'm gonna just get my screen going here so I can see. So I just want to make sure, Nick, you guys are seeing our presentation here.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great, thank you. Um, Now, let's start with a question. So let's take a quick poll here. So are you cross-site scheduling today? So I believe Luke will be putting up Luke will be putting up a poll for us. And what we want to know is, are you proactively scheduling across different sites, locations? If it could be several different healthcare facilities that you have, I could be able to pick up a shift or swap a shift down where my parents live on the weekends if I'm in college. Just, are you doing it at any level whatsoever, or are you wanting to do it better, or are you not doing it right now and you would like to do it better? So Luke will provide us with the answers. Great. So no, but we would like to, and yes, those are the two answers that we have here. So hopefully and again, feel free to put some questions out into the chat box, raise your hand, or just simply interrupt us as we're talking, because we would love to have more information from you guys on the the folks who are yes, and what does that look like for you guys. So we're going to spend just a little time here getting to know the cross-site scheduling, where we started, why we're even talking about it. So early in 1990, William Kahn wrote an article about employee engagement. It was the first time that anyone started to talk about employee engagement. What does that really mean? And really, William Kahn basically touched on it, which just said, hey, your employees would like to have more control over their schedule. And then that moved into, well, they'd like to have more control over different kinds of availability. Well, they'd really like to pick what days they want to work. But we knew early on in 1990 or so that was a little difficult, because we had shifts that were open at times that we needed our employees to be there. So we needed to dictate a little bit into who's going to be who, what, when, where, and how of scheduling. Then we moved into this sharing of employees. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about cross-site scheduling, we are talking about, you have run a forecast and now you're getting ready to schedule across many different sites, not just your own home store or your own home department or your own home hospital, but you have ability to schedule across different venues, different locations. So not sharing, like Stacy, if your store really was, using a retail example, if your store was down a manager and you were down 2 full-time employees, we would be sharing employees to help you during that time while you're hiring somebody. What we're talking about now and how we progressed is actually scheduling people there beyond just the sharing element of it. So as we move through this and into 2019, we started to see that the workforce management vendors were putting into play some capabilities inside of their tools. So you could use job transfer sets, you could use the different hierarchies and organizational structures to be able to open up the site so that I could schedule myself, or that my manager could schedule me in other places. Not quite there. There is automation, but they were just not quite there. And then right at the end, right at 2019, we started to see this mobile front end. And this is truly where employees could engage in their mobile phones, on their iPads, however you guys had decided, and they began to own a lot more of their own schedule. They were putting in their own availability. They were updating when they wanted to work somewhere else. If I was going home for a long break, I could maybe schedule myself to work in Melbourne, but I was going to college or the university in Sydney. So I had a lot more autonomy. And then, as you only know what we were going to say, Stacey, what happened?
2020 happened, COVID happened, right? So suddenly we're no longer cross-site scheduling because we have all these COVID restrictions. So you might not have even been able to go to a site that was not your home base. So instead of thinking about how we're going to use our team members effectively across all of our locations, instead we're thinking about how do we make work from home happen, and how do we make this possible as much as we can, and what does that mean? What are the new health and safety issues from this new change and this new challenge, essentially? We also then saw the gig industry was affected. So no longer are people able to work in multiple jobs like they had been doing previously. So if you've got a job at a quarantine hospital, obviously you can no longer work your other jobs. You might have had serious health risks there, of course. So big changes that happened. We saw that paper goods were in short supply, so actually several times, but it wasn't just our paper goods that were impacted last year. So it was also our labour that we also were experiencing short supply of. So we had team members that were ill, team members that need to quarantine, and suddenly we don't have as many team members that we can leverage across our multiple sites that we might be scheduling for. We then also saw our scheduling practices had to change as well. So dramatic changes in what we needed to be doing instead in our workplaces. Suddenly there's frequent and intense cleaning that we need to make sure occurs. And that's a different task that we need to be scheduling for and catering for as well. And then we're thinking about supply chain impacts. So again, work from home, so much more prevalent, and it just changed the industry in a lot of ways as well. So instead, people were going to dinner in different places that were close to home instead of places that were close to their workplace. Where you went to shop, where you went to the doctors, all of these things changed. And it meant our businesses then had to pivot and make sure that they responded to these changes in demand. We know that urban spread is just continuing. And now that we have this work from home focus, it's just going to continue, because no longer do our employees have to be based close to the office or focus so much on that commute that's so important to everyone. Now we can live where we want to live in a lot of industries. So that means, again, we're going to have to start thinking about what does this do to our team, and how does this impact, again, on our cross-site scheduling. So it's time for us to pivot, think about what we want to do to get back into concentrating on cross-site scheduling again.
Yeah, there was just so much else that we had to focus on for 2020 that we just couldn't even think about employees working in other locations of anything, right? I think that in some cases with essential businesses being, whether it was the healthcare industry, grocer, home goods, and a home improvement, we would love to have scheduled across those locations, because we saw, like, just exactly what you said with the urban spread, those particular outlying suburban areas started to see such a huge impact in their traffic. There just wasn't enough employees to cover that during that time. It was very hard during that. And then just a funny story, Bob and I, our last business trip, and Bob and I are on the road all the time, but our last business trip was Australia, and it was the week that the paper shortage was happening. Now, remember, everything had just kind of started. So Bob and I are like, what's going on? They had locked like the front doors of our hotels so people wouldn't come in and take toilet paper out of the bathrooms. We're like, this is crazy. And then we get home and it has just started. It was funny. That was our last trip. So we took a hiatus, right? Not on purpose, not because of anything other than the pandemic set this up for us. So now, and you guys are leading the way, right? You are leading the way of opening quite broadly in everything that you're doing. And I always use this when I'm talking to Stacey or Nick and to you guys as customers, that you're kind of back to normal, comparatively speaking, to some of the other countries, right? So when we think about that, we can now start thinking about what were some of those initiatives that you were taking on, and what did the pandemic change that now you have to think a little differently on? So the first thing, sorry, Stacey, that was the last one that we spoke about there. I think I backed up a little. So the first thing that we spoke about was really, we need to understand what cross-site scheduling is today, right? So it's still not sharing, and it is literally giving your employees the ability to schedule themselves, as well as you scheduling them across different locations. And that might look a tiny bit different than it did in 2019. You're having to define what that looks like for you and for your journey and where you are for your employees. The other thing is, while so much of the technology sped up in the last year, in fact, I think, Bob, what did we say, that technology saw an increase?
Well, yeah, we saw adoption increase of a number of different technologies, anywhere from 5 to 10 years around the world, just, because of the pandemic.
Right. Acceleration was huge here. Now, what hasn't happened though, we didn't see the automated scheduling systems inside of workforce management tools start to by any means increase in leaps and bounds. So you're still going to have a bit of an issue here with the automation of cross-site scheduling. So we're going to have to define that. And then the last is, you might not have involved your employees as much as you need to now. And one of the things that Stacey's going to walk us through next is to remember that a benefit is not a benefit if it's really not a benefit. So if it is not really, it looks good on paper, it feels good that you're doing the right things, but if not one of your employees can take advantage of it, then it's not seen as a benefit. So Stacey, I think we'll dig down in here, right? So let's break down what we just talked about into a few areas that we need you guys to really start thinking about when you begin to cross-site scheduling. Don't just take this opportunity to cross-site and just go, okay, wait, I'm just going to take the top 10 people. We're going to schedule them everywhere. The ER nurses are now going to neonatal. You guys just can go everywhere, right, Stacey? There's still some rules around this, right?
Yeah, there definitely is a few rules. So I think when we're thinking about cross-site scheduling, there's a few really key principles and considerations that we really need to address. So the first one that I'd call out is locations. So what locations are suitable to be included in our cross-site scheduling? Okay, so if some sites are, for example, very remote to others, that might not be a suitable location. If it's too far to travel to or very difficult to get to from other locations, it might not make sense for those particular locations to be included in this. There's nothing worse for both parties than for a team member accepting a shift, not realizing it's so far away from their home base. This is not going to work out for anyone in this scenario. The next question that I always ask is, who should be able to schedule? So it's not just a free-for-all, but needs to be properly considered. So is a nurse and they can work at any location? Or are there differences between the locations that should be considered and might perhaps prevent cross scheduling from occurring? So some roles are required to be based in a single location, as we all know. But also just a challenge on that, are we maybe discounting some team members from being eligible without really examining why? So should it only be customer-facing team members who have the ability to work across our sites? Or is this another opportunity to add engagement for our leaders and offer some upskilling opportunities, for example? And always, it's really important for us to consider how employment conditions could be impacted when we're working in a different role or in a different location, especially across states. And then when we think about this, the whole concept of cross-site scheduling, one of the really key things is that onboarding and how effective it needs to be. So when we're thinking about that, it's both the team member who's going to work somewhere else in a different department or a different location, but also for those existing team members who are relying on this new team member to come in, be effective and contribute as needed for that particular shift. So if the process isn't smooth, again, it's not a win for any party. It can actually turn the process into a negative overall as well. So some of this can be just as simple as communicating those key items, such as where to park, where to put your belongings, where do you meet for the start of your shift. Without that communication in this area, the team member's going to feel lost. They may not be as effective or comfortable in their work that day, and And it might also be something that deters them from considering some of these open shifts in the future as well. And then when we think about that sort of automation side, some workforce management tools, it's pretty easy to set up and maintain cross-site scheduling, including our open shift offerings. In others, there's some admin involved. So what we would say is make sure you do question and challenge your vendor in this area about functionality and features that you might not be utilizing at the moment, or that might be new, or that might be on the roadmap. And we want to make sure that you are able to utilize them as they become available to you, and that you can remain current in this area as well.
And the administration part, I feel like sometimes it seems a little basic about what we're trying to do or what you should be doing in terms of the requirements. But I think if you really stop and think about from the employee side, all of this administrative piece that has to be in play, right? I have to know where I'm going. I have to know why I would want to go, right? So what does it get me? And then at the end of the day, I need to be able to see my schedule in one place, my whole schedule, every place that I'm going. And then I need to see the result of that. So my time card has to also be very reflective of it. And then on the flip side of that, as anybody that's administering a budget, a payroll, a utilization target, an hours target, whatever it is that they are scheduling to, they need to be able to track it back to how effective were we, right? So all of those reports then need to show me exactly how many people worked in my store from another store. What was the pay rate that we used? So what payroll did I generate out of my store? So is this really an effective program? Great that my employees might like it, but I might be a great location. People love to come to my store. I'm at the Rocks. I'm in, on the Gold Coast. I'm in a fancy place that people want to work at, but I don't do a lot of revenue. So all of a sudden I get the really expensive employees that have been around for a while, causing that to be the least profitable way in managing that store. So, or location or healthcare. There are so many things that you need to think about, I think, from this standpoint. And I would love to be able to say there are all kinds of tools out there that cover this very easily for you. There are tools. It's more about the upfront planning, requirements gathering, and this building the automation around it right now. And I think there absolutely will be, because I don't know, Stacey, I think that these guys here with us today and our clients we talk to will be asking for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the last thing we want to leave you guys with is, how can we help you, or why would we even talk about cross-site scheduling? And the reason that we wanted to bring it up today is we found some pitfalls, some risk, and some concerns when we've been working with our clients in the past if you skip any of these steps. So we just wanted to give you as much education on this, so that if it is really the right benefit for you and your employees, that you're able to embrace it in the right manner. And the first is very simple when we say planning, but it's truly about building a roadmap. And this isn't a strategic, it doesn't have to be a fancy roadmap. It's truly talking about all those things that Stacey said. What do I want to get out of cross-site scheduling? Why am I doing this? Is this truly a benefit? And planning out the roadmap of success for it. So you're going to have to think about people, process, and technology along the way, because all of those areas are going to be affected. In fact, in your planning process, you might even say the crawl, walk, run for us is that the very first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to survey our employees. We're going to ask a lot of our employees. We're going to spend a lot of time asking up front, is this truly a benefit? Once you define that, then you might move into the next steps of the roadmap, which could be taking a chance now of saying, okay, how is this going to impact them? What's the workload going to look like on our administrators of this? How is this going to affect scheduling? All of those pieces and parts. So this part is so important to get it right. It's not a long drawn out process, but it absolutely is time consuming to get this right. And I know from planning, Stacey, the next step is something that you just can't ignore as well, right? I mean, this is really important in these areas.
Yeah. So But requirements truly are the key to the success of your solution. I can't say it in any more bright lights. This is so key. So often a business might think that this is just another feature to turn on. Okay, so think I'm just going to enable cross-site scheduling. I'm going to turn this on. Whereas, that's so far from the truth. So we need to spend some time with careful assessment and planning in this area, especially some of the factors that we mentioned briefly before. Who should be able to transfer? Where should they be able to transfer to? Who needs to have that oversight and approval of this process as well? So it's bigger than just what are we going to configure in the system? How are we going to set this up? But what are the larger business processes that are also required to support this as well? And once we've got those requirements set, obviously we're then moving into our implementation section. I don't think I need to say it. Everyone knows how important, how large this piece is. This step should be about 3 pieces bigger in our slides. This is obviously, where we spend a lot of time and effort as well. But I think it's essential just to make sure that we call out, don't get bogged down in the decision making, the configuration, the testing, all of those aspects that come with rolling out new functionality. We need to make sure that we're also focusing on the essential pieces of training, of change management, and communication, and how we can use these to enhance our implementation, enhance our rollout, and of course, the overall success of your project as well.
One of the things, Stacey, I was thinking about too was if you thought about an employee who for the first time was going to go work into a brand new healthcare center, or I have decided to go down to Melbourne to visit my family, and I'm going to stay for a couple of weeks and I'm going to work there. Every time an employee starts a new shift at a new location, it's like a brand new employee. They might know the company, they might have known the role that they did in Sydney, but every time that they are walking into a new site, it's as if they're onboarding the first time. So you've got to make sure that you implement this correctly so that it's so smooth every time they go into these sites that it feels the same every place they go. Understanding that the location might look different, but I'm aware of it because I've been onboarded correctly. There was a mini little video about this location. I just looked at it. I know where to go and what to do. So think of it in that way.
I think it's so important to think about it. Would you bring on a new employee and would you just send them in and say, hey, let's go and start work today, right? We would never say that that's a successful onboarding. So thinking about it from that perspective, I think is so key, Robin, to then say, well, hey, have we actually made them feel comfortable? Have we given them the essential information and that onboarding that they need to go and be successful in this shift today? And it's got to be terrifying. We all have done that first day of a new job. So imagine doing this multiple times because we're at different locations. It's all new people, all different team members. Who do I need to know, right? So there's so many digital options that we can use there to smooth this transition and make this a positive experience for everyone.
Right. And the very last part that I say I feel like it always gets kind of left to the end is because it does get left to the end, right? We just think, okay, we've done it. I'm exhausted. They're doing fine. But in this particular element, I think it's really important to spend some time using the reports that are available to understand how impactful this has really been to you as a company. So are people really utilizing the ability to schedule across sites, locations, in different cities, whatever you guys have decided for the locations? Are they really taking advantage of it? Like how many times out of a schedule do you have other people working in other stores or other people working in your stores? How many times do people not show up on those shifts? All those things that you can measure. It's really important, I think, for this, because remember, you're not impacting just one store, one department, one healthcare unit. This could impact several departments and several different locations. So the measurement, I think, is just so key to all of this for all the reasons that we absolutely know, right? So that's the end of that's the end of today. We could go on forever, but we definitely will not hold you up from wine and cheese because that would probably not be worth it. So Nick, I think, Stacey, was there anything else that you wanted to cover?
No, but I think that if anyone wants to have a chat at any time, always keen to chat through this in more detail, anything that's specific to your business and how we might be able to help as well. But also know everyone's a bit keen for the cheese and wine, and we have gone a few minutes over.
Nigel, I love your comment. And it's funny, we usually in this presentation have talked about this before, but Nigel brought up one of the barriers that he's come across is paying employees for different jobs and where overtime sits. Oh my gosh. We were just talking about this earlier today where not only is it about scheduling, but it is there a premium rate for that particular position? Do they get paid a different rate in a different location? Well, if I'm in New South Wales, do I get paid something there? And then what about the hours? Does the hour, if I work my 14th hour, does that trigger, a different rate? And so where is that going to sit? And I'm going to see that in one time card. And is there going to be one place that I'm going to be able to put that? So Nigel, have you guys come up with anything creative on it, or is it truly like, no, this is a barrier?
Well, it is a barrier when you've got employees paid under the Australian Modern Awards, because there are time triggers at a daily threshold and time triggers at a fortnightly threshold. So the issue is that an organisation can hire an employee to come and fill a shift from another, particularly in healthcare is where I work. They can call a person in from another nearby home and without knowing, find out that they've just hired somebody who's going to get paid double time or time and a half. They've got no way of actually identifying that until it actually happens. So that is and that's a barrier for people who run aged care centres. They're going to go, oh, I don't know, I want to take that risk. It's one of those hidden factors, because in aged care, not only do you're actually, people do different jobs. So people might work in one home doing, say, a cleaning job, and another doing the kitchen, or another doing. So they actually change roles and different pay rates as well. It's not that they're doing the same, they're not even doing the same job. But, in aged care, there is this terminology of, we're hearing about unlocking the workforce. And because resources are so scarce, they are trying to encourage people to, part-time people to increase their hours, not to work for other aged care centres, just to work for the one, and across centres. So there's all sorts of dynamics going on in that space.
Nigel, that brings up a great point. Something that we have been discussing lately with our clients a lot has been this major pivot from, remember in the 2018-19, where the gig economy was all of a sudden on super speed, and it was a sexy term that everybody thought that was what was going to take over next, was that I worked at, I could work at aged care, I could work at a Starbucks, and then I could work at another complete industry, because I wanted to fulfill my 40-hour, 38.8, whatever, my time card up, and I didn't care where I worked, right? So it was really just this gig economy. All of a sudden, what we're hearing is exactly what you just said, is unlocking the workforce by bringing the gig economy into my own industry, into my own corporation. So I'd rather have Nigel working at 4 aged care places, locations, than for you to work for other companies or even other industries. So then you bring them in to try to fulfill their full-time hours within yourself, and that's across locations. And the biggest, I think the technology right now has got to catch up to make this so much easier for you guys. Like you said, Nigel, whether it's access to information, how do I get the right rates? How do I get the right roles? How do I get all of that accessible and easier so that I can bring that gig economy home internally?
One of the things that happened during COVID, when the state governments brought in rules about restricting you working in multiple homes, is in Victoria, you had to then bring the employee into their primary home, and you had to pay all their hours. one of the issues that identified for one of the major aged care providers I work with, they suddenly found out they had employees who were working full-time for them and full-time for another employee. So they were working days and nights. So we had many employees that were working 120 hours a week and they didn't even know it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was profitable for them, I take, for the employee.
Yeah, but it's not good from an OH&S and work.
Absolutely.
That's problematic. That directive from the Victorian government, the way you had to manage that, actually highlighted all these issues.
Right.
But how you deal with them is another difficult. And this idea of cross-working and capturing all this, what it does is it highlights working practices that otherwise weren't seen. It brings them to the surface. That's another why some people are resistant to this, because it identifies things that they may not want to know, want exposed elsewhere in their business.
Yeah. It might open a Pandora's box, right? If you open that one, yeah.
Right.
Good call out.
Julia, you mentioned, I want to make sure I have that correct, which is you have that working really well. Do you have a way for what Nigel brought up? Was that what you were responding to?
Yes. So essentially what we have is we have a number of home employees that work across homes, and they could essentially have dual roles as well. So I could be an FSA in the morning, and then food services assistant in the morning working in the kitchen, and then in the afternoon I may work an RN shift. So granted, as with what Nigel said, there are EA boundaries and limitation of hour spans that need to work. But what we have come across with here is more or less education. So to educate our key stakeholders that actually drive and do a lot of the maintenance and the additions when it comes to hours. So what we've done from our perspective is actually educate our admins who actually drive a lot of the entries, who monitor a lot of the entries that need to happen, and therefore making sure that the entry goes in correctly using UKG and making sure that that hour spans monitored across all of our states. So there is, functionality around having to maintain that with a number of reports that can use and assist you with monitoring that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is education is the key. So when you have your key, drivers sitting in the hot seat, making sure that they understand what entries need to happen and the amount of entries which cater for that premium, as Nigel mentioned before, is aware of how they do that entry, and that's the important part, and making sure that they don't exceed the standard hours in the fortnight.
I think you made a good point, Julia, that we all, I guess, it's good to call out in terms of your technology can be fantastic, but it comes down to your end users who are using it as well. They need to have that understanding of what they're doing, and that all comes down to that training piece as well. So as I was saying before, we often get bogged down in implementation and what are our requirements and those sort of questions, but then making sure we then follow that up with how does that translate to those end users, and how we're educating them, and what's the documentation or the ongoing training that supports that as well longer term. So I think it's a really good call out. Thank you, Julia.
Thanks, Stacey.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think the other thing too on the education side of it, Julia, that I think is really important is that when I say end user, whether it's the administrative piece person that's going to have the quality control or the check on it, is that they're also part of that planning process with you, because I think their feedback on this is how we work today can help to identify some gaps that might occur in the beginning when you're trying to set up something new like this. So Nigel, to your point, making sure that everyone understands that no, you cannot work 40 in one home and 40 in another home, that for all the reasons we know. And so you need to be on the lookout for that, or you need to be aware of that. Or so I think so on educating and just getting to that point is anyway, is both sided. So I really think that we could go on for a very long time. I think you guys have some really great ideas around this. And what I would suggest and would love is if you guys had a chance to send an email to Nick, and if you had an idea or a thought you want to have a little bit more of a thought leadership discussion on, we would love to be able to do that. So what I don't want to do is hold up Paul any longer, because this is really important what happens next, more important than anything we would ever do. So, and though I just wanted to, I'll let Bob come back on as well. And Nick and Stacy, thank you for letting Bob and I join from the States today. The very sad thing is that we are not there. Stacy and Nick know how much that I just want to be there. So thank you for letting us join, because Bob and I are probably going to head to bed. We're going to let you guys enjoy the wonderful wine and cheese.
No, thank you to you both. Much appreciated. Obviously staying up a little bit later than usual, and for your insight and background. And of course, if anyone has any questions for Bob and Robin, please feel free to reach out to them directly or through Stacey and I. But thank you to you both for your time this evening.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the event.